All right, so without further ado, please help me give Mr. Kevin Yokum a warm welcome. He is with Williams. Kevin? Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
It's okay, no problem.
So much.
Enjoy.
Okay.
Yep. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I've never seen so many people excited about restoration before, okay? Rooms packed full of folks, an incredible turnout, pretty exciting. Let's talk about that title a little bit. So when Sam asked me to come and speak, she said, what do you want to talk about? And I said, well, whatever environmental that you think is there. And she said, well, how about restoration? And I said, great, that'll be good for 10 minutes. She goes, well, you got to speak for 45. Okay, and so I'm like, holy cow, how are we going to handle that? Restoration is vital, it's very important, it's not very exciting. It can be, but when it's exciting, it's not very good for our business, okay? Not very good at all when restoration is exciting. So we got restoration. We got landslides. Now, landslides are very exciting. Also for the negative reason, because it costs us a lot of money. There's a lot of liability associated with that, and we don't want any of those, not when we're in our business, okay? So, how do we make it exciting so people show up? I say, you got to help me, Sam. He said, okay, let's give it to marketing. And so we came up with some other hot environmental topics, right? Kind of catchy. You're like, I didn't even know environmental could be hot. Okay, that's a great thing to start with. And what are those other things that we're going to talk about today, right? We'll unveil those at the end. It's kind of catchy, kind of wants to perk your interest, right? Well, you should see the title we had to start with because we got marketing involved, but then we had legal look at it. So they sliced it to pieces. Nothing politically controversial, nothing socio, you name it. I didn't even know what I was talking about by the time I got that title back. Okay, so now we're back to negotiating. This is what we ended up with. So we'll go through restoration. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll certainly talk about landslides. Landslides are one of the things that a lot of the folks in this room deal with, okay, one way or the other. So landslides certainly a popular thing. Gosh, I've been in this business since the Ice Age, it seems like. Of Marcellus, the Wild West days, when we first came in. I see Stuart over here. He was one of the first ones that came in on the company that we were working with. And gosh, through Chesapeake Midstream, Access Midstream, now with Williams, a lot of great people, a lot of areas, West Virginia, PA, Ohio, that we've had the pleasure to work with into that time frame. But something probably a lot of you folks don't know about me, I always try to throw a little bit of that in. And so a lot of you folks probably don't know that I was an outdoor writer. I published in about 40 magazines across North America, traveling to places like Belize and Alaska, and lots of cool things and adventures, hunting and fishing and travel. And you might say, well, why aren't you doing that still? Well, that's a great question. Either I'm a big idiot, or C, the life of a travel writer is awfully hard on a young family with young kids. So a lot of travel involved in that, and I take that pretty seriously. So didn't want to have the negative effect of that. So good adventure, kind of a neat thing. Also did a little bit of work for a little company called ESPN. You might have heard of those out there. Pretty exciting venture, the same kind of thing. They took over several of the bass circuits, BASS in particular, and they wanted someone who could explain the science behind fishing. And science was sexy at that point in time, okay? Being able to convey their message and explain the technicalities behind that. And I just happened to fall in a lucky spot during that time period. So seeing how Sports Center's filmed, how behind the scenes, how multimedia works at a fast pace, good experience, really was. Still use that in my career today, learning how all those things function. So kind of a couple neat things. Most folks don't know about me. So let's talk about, did it go? Oh. There we go. Right way. Restoration. All right, let's just dive right in. And if you know anything about me, I'm pretty genuine. You want to ask questions, you want to talk during the presentation, pipe right up, raise your hand, and we'll get into that. We will leave some time at the end for that as well. But interaction, networking, that's what this is all about. So let's make it a productive time and a very positive experience. So that's what we want to see right there, a pipeline that's all vegetated, it's green, it's picturesque, it's back to the same contours. So that's what we're trying to achieve, okay, with restoration. That's the ultimate goal. So what is restoration? As I look around, I see a lot of different experiences in the room, and I don't recognize everybody, but I do recognize a lot of familiar faces. So dig a ditch, build a pipeline, lower that in. Where do we go from there? We got to put all that soil back. That's it, called the put back. Filling in the ditch, there's lots of terminology for that. Basically, we're going to fill that in. We're going to make our water bars. We're going to shape that, rough that in, and then, in the picture to the right, we're going to seed and mulch that. Okay, we're going to cover that up. We're going to put our seed in there and mulch it, hydroseed it, something to that effect, and hope it grows. Okay, that's the first stages of restoration. So we're going to backfill that. Topsoil is a big portion of this. Now, if you look at this picture, you can see this has already been put back and seeded and mulched. But what about the bottom there? What is that? Did we forget something? Now, what happens when we build in the fall or in the winter? It really would be great just to build in the spring and the summer, wouldn't it? But that's not our world here. We're at the whims of the drillers and our clients all the time. We've got to do business year-round, okay? And that means landslides, that means restoration, building pipelines, et cetera. So basically, we've temporarily stabilized that to set through winter. Come spring, we'll put that topsoil, which is the pile that you see there, back in place and reseed and remulch that, okay? Do you think that causes any problems? You better believe it. It's tough to hold all that over the winter with the precip and the runoff and the snow and the freeze and thaw cycles. So those are some of the challenges that the folks in this room deal with all the time. They're talking to Thomas there, he was talking about Louisiana. You think they have to deal with that down there? No. Last year I got to go out to Texas, Oklahoma. Big project, 300-mile pipeline. I thought, oh my gosh, first environmental construction audit we've ever done at Williams. Big deal, CEO mentioned it. 300 miles, and neither state has a stormwater permit. There were 7 pages of permits, and that was it for the entire 300 miles. I came back and I told my boss, listen, that's ridiculous. You got to give me a raise, man. We have 100 pages sometimes of permits on some of our pipelines, okay, in the overregulated east here. So different areas of the country, different perspectives, different problems. And if you don't understand this, looking way back to the Wild West days of the Marcellus, lots of people came here to do business from Texas, Oklahoma. The pads fell off the hills. Why? They didn't understand our erosion cycles, our topography, the landslide issues that were here. We had to learn that, okay? Lots of times we had to learn that the hard way. Different perspectives, different problems, okay? All has to do with where you're doing business. We're going to put water bars. You'll see a lot of talk about water bars today. Why are water bars important? Somebody tell me, why are water bars important? Slow down the water. If you don't manage the water will manage you. Okay? Big issue. Water managed all over. The East's got water everywhere. On the surface, under the surface, sometimes in caverns underground. We don't see it till we cut in there. All kind of stuff. So managing water is really an important scenario. Seed and mulch. Boy, that sounds simple, right? I just throw some seed out in my yard or buy a pre-packed mixture down at Lowe's and it grows, right? Get out here to the pipelines and you're talking through forest and woods and acidic soil and all kind of slope issues. That's a big deal. You better have the right seed mix, you better put the right additives in there, and you better be able to hold that mulch or whatever topping that you're adding there in place for it to grow. Otherwise, you're going to have issues, okay? So that's the restoration process. 2. So why is it important? That's what it is. Why is restoration important? because it's the last thing that you see. That's what we're going to live with from now on. Your landowners, when you finish restoration, the shape of the land, the condition that it's in, whether you put in the right water bars, whether you're holding that soil there or it's eroding, that's what you're left with. That's what they're going to see for the rest of their life, potentially. Okay? Now, has anybody in the room ever gone back to the same landowner and asked for another right-of-way? All the time, right? All the time. 2, 3 lines, you name it. Really important. Never been more important than today. But when you finish that restoration process, that your landowners are happy. Okay? They're happy out there. Agency approval. We had some conversations early on about that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we have to get sign-off from the state agencies, particularly for our stormwater permit. Everywhere we do business, doesn't matter if it's an acre, 5 acres, or 500 acres. We have to get their buy-off. That's getting tougher and tougher every day, okay, to get that buy-off of those agencies. So it all starts and ends with restoration, it really does. And of course, we'll deal with landslides and other problems there. You don't put that soil back the right place, the right time, you're gonna have issues. And some of those can be landslides. So how do you do it? What are some good restoration practices that are involved? I'll go ahead and talk while you're doing that. That's okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so contractors. I see some contractors in the room, right? How do you know a good contractor from a bad contractor? You guys all say the same thing, right? You come into the room, we're all dressed up, we're all in suit and ties, and we sit around and talk about it. And I guarantee you, everyone says, hey, we're the best. We're going to do a great job. Okay? So how do you pick the good ones from the not so good contractors? Like I tell you, I have a great insight in that, but really it comes down to experience. What are you comfortable with? Trial and error. Who does a good job? Is it economically feasible, right? We all want the cheapest ones that are out there. It's always a cost measure of that whole process. 2 things in this industry. What are they that drive us? Time and money. Time and money. Every decision we make has to do with time and money. So getting that balance, that's really critical, okay? Good quality contractors at a decent price. Now, what happens a lot of time in all right, so good restoration practices. I'll let him work on that while we're getting going here. Good restoration practices. Contractors. Inspection, right? We got our contractors out there. 3 times in my career, I built a team of inspectors. The first time I had to let those guys go when I switched companies, I cried. Because I built up a team that was really good. I trusted them. They trusted me. They're my eyes and my ears out there. When I'm working in 3 different states, I don't have the ability to be out there on every site. You just don't have to do it. So you have to trust somebody out there, and that's your inspection team for me. Okay? Inspectors, good quality folks that are out there. And when you build that team up and you can sleep well at night, that's a good thing. Okay, so inspection is really key, because guess what happens when we overload our contractors? We have them building projects everywhere. They have the A team on there when they're putting the pipe in the ground, because that's where the money is. Everybody wants to do that. And then when the restoration team comes, they move that A team over to the next job and lay some more pipe. And I get the D team. Is that fair? It's probably not fair to say that, okay? That's not fair at all. But that happens sometimes. That's I've seen that happen when we had problems. Usually it's associated with it. Because why? Everybody thinks restoration is easy. We should all be able to do that, okay? Just putting the ground back, sowing some seed out there, then we walk away from it. It grows and everything's magically okay. Okay? That only happens when you have oversight, and that's inspection. Okay? Good inspection out there. Oh, you got to fix. Good deal. Good deal, man. All right. So, talked about water bars, that's drainage. We got to make sure those are in there, all right? So we got to have that. Custom seed mixes. Can't emphasize that enough. When I got the Williams in the front of the inspection sheets there of our alignment, we laid those out, we had 33 seed mixes. You could pick and choose what you wanted, but my goodness, 33 different. They may have all been good at different times, but it created a ton of confusion for us, for our contractors, everybody that was involved. And one of the things I did when I first got there was we sat down, we said, what do we want? Let's come up with one preferred seed mix. Oh, dumb farm boy that I am, okay, came up with good seed mix. Cool season grass, warm season grass, couple, we got to keep our deer farmers happy, right? Our hunters out there. So we got a couple clovers in there. We got a species that grows in acidic soils. And we have one that has a huge taproot that we put in on our steep slopes, okay? Covers all seasons, it's well-rounded. And we also have in our pasture areas, we throw in Timothy as well, okay? Throw in another that the farmers are happy with. Got to keep those guys happy. A lot of our land comes from there. So seed mixes, really, really critical. Man, that thing's just jumping all over the place, isn't it? Let's go back here.
At least we can go back now.
Yeah, at least it'll go back. So, and the other thing that I would add is the additives that are associated with that, okay? Where is one of the places that a contractor might skimp on today? Is fertilizer expensive?
Yeah.
Holy crap, okay? Tripled in costs. Lime fertilizer. So that's one of the places we have to make sure that our contractors are adding that in out there, okay? Getting that good additive so we can get the good growth. All right, problems. I talked about wintertime stabilization, right? You build it in the winter, it's tough to put that back, okay? Compaction is always an issue, right? Ground's frozen or it's sloppy, it's too wet, not very good. So wintertime compaction is always a problem. Now let's talk about agencies. Agencies, okay? Agency, NOT. What's NOT stand for? Jeremiah, what's NOT stand for? Notice of termination, okay? NOT, that's the gold mine. That's what we all want, okay? That's when it comes in and the agency says, yep, you got it right. You can close this permit out. I go back to my project managers and tell them they can put those capital dollars back in the kitty fund, and everybody's happy. Okay? I'm going to tell you, in Pennsylvania, there's so much inconsistency now between the different offices and the places that are there. It's very difficult for us to get NOT. We're having a lot of problems, a lot of issues. A lot of companies are having so many NOVs out there for reasons that are very difficult to understand. Okay, and it's having a counterproductive effect on a lot of things. So Pennsylvania is extremely difficult to get NOT in a timely fashion right now. Okay, so we could spend all day talking about that. West Virginia, daggone, that thing's jumping around again. West Virginia is getting there, okay? We've had really good relationships with West Virginia in the past, and there's been a lot of personnel changes. Okay, a lot of personnel changes there, and it's getting extremely difficult now with the new scrutiny. And it comes over the 70% rule. Okay, 70% rule says when you put your pipeline back, you have to have 70% of that in permanent vegetation. Here's the key: uniformly distributed across your area. Okay? Way back in the Ice Age, I helped write the rules and regs back in my state days in West Virginia. That's not what it meant. It meant that you didn't come to a big steep hill with the last 5% of your line and be like, hey, listen, we're not going to spend an extra $1 million fixing that down there. We're just going to move on. Okay? That's what uniform. They are changing the scope of our project now. And I've had it explained a few times that every inch of your property has to have that 70% vegetation. Okay, that's golf course management, right? I'm in the wrong field. I should be over there doing that.
Which makes it 99%, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. A lot of our what's that doing? That's adding 6 months to a year on this closeout of our process. We're having to restore, then we're having to go back when we think it's ready and re-restore again with spot fixes and golf course management. Okay? It's becoming extremely difficult to get those. It just adds a lot more cost and money to our time. West Virginia. And Ohio, I love Ohio. Started taking over the compliance up there, and they're still catching up with the others. It's pretty easy to get an NOT in Ohio right now. Of course, it's a lot less steep topography in Ohio, better ground, a little bit better nutrients, more open space there. So a lot of reasons for that, but good stuff. Landslides. See a landslide over here on this side, pretty major. Does that look like a good right-of-way to you guys? That's my West Virginia project last fall. It's only a mile long. Look at all those turkeys up there. They're extremely happy, right? Those turkeys picked the back of 3 of those water bars up there, and that was, NOT was denied because of the backside of those 3 water bars were vacant. No erosion, no anything, just a little bit of bare ground there. Less than 0.1% of the whole surface area of that project. I'm still holding on to that. Hopefully I can turn it in this spring. But that's where we're getting to these days. It's a head scratcher, isn't it? Makes it a lot more expense, difficult times to close those out. Now, bad day. That must be me doing that up here, right? I'm gonna put that in my pocket. So, this is a bad day. Okay, come around the side of the hill, and yes, that's an old picture, Thomas, because that's got the old Curlex on there that nobody uses anymore. Right, comes down, that's in PA too. Get in the stream, we got to report that, call that in, that's a violation, maybe a fine, everything we don't want, okay? Bad day. That's an even worse day. Why? Because that landslide's coming off the hill. Now we got a house, now we're going to show up on the 5 o'clock news. Okay? So nobody wants to show up on the 5 o'clock news, right? Because everybody sees that, and then they're like, man, that oil and gas business, that's not good. Okay? Never in my career has environmental been such a high stakes game. It affects stock prices, it affects permitting, it affects public opinion now. None of us can afford these type of issues. And it really doesn't matter if it's my company or your company or the company next door. If it's associated with oil and gas, we're all going to take the blame for it. Because the people who watch the 5 o'clock news don't really know ARS from Williams to TransCanada. They know it's oil and gas. So we all have to be part of that solution. We all have to get better. We all have to get better execution out there. So how do we do it if we're on this kind of slope? That's a real photo, by the way. That's steep, isn't it? How about that one? That's even steeper. You can't see the lower excavator down there, okay? That's what we work on. I mean, that's what we're charged with doing on a day-to-day basis. And why in the world would we think we can cut a 100-foot swath, sometimes 10 foot deep, put a metal straw in it and pat it back and expect it to stay? That's a pretty tough gig, isn't it? Guys do that all the time. Yes, go ahead.
In that case, do you have to bring in a whole bunch of fill, like topsoil fill from some?
No, that's all there. That's calcimite. What you see right there, that white powder, is calcimite that dries the soil out. A lot of those steep ravines and areas have water sources in them, and to prevent landslides, sometimes we have to bring calcimite. That's a product in that mixes with the soil, dries it out so that we can get a decent compaction back in there.
How do you get the big trucks up that hill?
We winch them. Winch them in, winch them out.
Wow.
Yep, winch them in, winch them out. Good questions, though. Sometimes I just think, that everybody understands that, but that's my point about the 5 o'clock news. Okay, everybody on the 5 o'clock news doesn't know what we have. We've got to be better at telling our story and explaining all the things that we do to protect the environment in a day-to-day basis. We really do. And we have to put them in a context that the people who watch the 5 o'clock news can digest that. Okay, we really do. I'll talk about why later, but hey, what do we do to avoid them? Okay, we used to just slap the soil back on the hill and hope it stayed. Okay, get a good seed mix on there and then walk away from it, quite literally. We've come a long way since then. Now we're talking about it in the initial routing stages. We're involving our planners, and we're doing flyovers with LIDAR. Anybody know what LIDAR is? Yeah, see some ground penetrating radar, basically. It shows you what's underneath the soil, where your unstable slopes might be. And when we can, we avoid those areas. We avoid those areas in the front with routes and permitting, because we've found that if we don't, we pay the price. It costs a lot more on the tail end to build that pipeline, okay, with landslides and other things. The problem is, guess what? We're late in the game, aren't we? All the good ridges are already taken, aren't they? A lot of the areas where people are in are already occupied. So sometimes we don't have a choice. We got to go there. We got to build it. We have to meet our obligations. So sometimes we have to take bad routes. But when we have the option, certainly, we want to know what's there under the ground. So what do? We put in drains. Took me years and years to get our company to work on the front end of construction to put drains in while we have the equipment and the manpower right there on the right-of-way. And now everybody's bought into that system. So when we're building pipelines, we run into a water source or we get to a problem area. This happens to be American Wick Drain. So that's a subsurface. That sheeting that you see, the black sheeting, catches water, diverts it down into where we have pipes and rock. We can run that water off the right-of-way and exit it where we want to. Now, we learned the hard way, and some of my guys are even putting it under the pipe. Some of my construction managers love this concept so much, they're putting it under the pipe. Now, how much that helps? Some places it's very helpful, others I'm not so certain about, but it certainly doesn't hurt anything. And I don't want to do anything to distract my construction managers from working in some drains out there, okay? Doesn't cost a lot, it's cheap insurance. What we did learn was you can't just pipe water over the hill and expect it to be okay. Guess what happens when you pipe all that water over the hill and you don't have an outlet like this? It can create another landslide off right-of-way, which is even more of a headache than one on right-of-way sometimes. Okay? So we learned how to outlet those structures, divert that water, disperse it, take the energy away from it so it doesn't cause us problems as we're off right-of-way. Doesn't look like much here, does it? We spent $350K right there. Okay? But it looks good, doesn't it? Blends back in. All that slope was tore up like the previous picture at one point in time. We did a pretty good job restoring that back. That's what you see on the surface now. Big horseshoe drain there, got curtains over there, outletting both sides, but it's all restored. That's what we want, okay? We want to get glory on our price, our end of it. We want it to blend in. No news is good news in my world, okay? When the phone rings, this time of year, nobody wants to see me walk down the hall. Because I'm usually bringing a landslide photo to show them. Come spring in May, everybody wants to see me walk down the hall because I'm usually holding an NOT, and then we all celebrate at the end of that. Okay? We want it to blend in, look good. Now, here's another product that we use a lot now. This is a typical rip-rap drain. This is rock shield, concrete blanket, rock blanket, whatever you want to denote that. Little squares of concrete that are tied together basically with nylon string. Rolls out on the hillside all together. We stake that in, and that's a great hillside erosion protector. We use it a lot, and that picture doesn't do that hillside very good justice. If you'll look, you can't see the stream because it's so straight down off the last 100 feet there. But that's a pretty steep hillside. We'll run that water into that rock channel and disperse it all the way down the slope. So it dries out our slope, and we'll disperse that down near the stream. And sometimes we run it a long way. We've learned not to take shortcuts, okay? And that drain is insane because that's about a mile back in the middle of nowhere. Okay, it's expensive to haul that rock back in there and tram in and out. But we've learned not to outlet it over here or on the other side because it's unstable. We'll create another landslide there. So we'd rather spend a little more money up front, take it all the way down there. Okay, spend a little more money. It took me years and years and years to convince my administrators that let's spend a little more up front and not at the end. Not a lot at the end. And we had some smart administrators too, didn't we? It just wasn't the way that we thought of things at that point in time, because when you spent money, it was gone. Okay? And in my world, we're buying insurance, right? I can make sure something doesn't happen environmentally on the pipeline, but it's going to cost you so much, you probably won't build it. Okay? So it's a balance. How much can we afford to buy that gives us the right amount of protection? Keep bad stuff from happening. Geotech layers. Now, let's say it's too far to haul back rock into the wilderness. We're putting in geotech layers, basically a filter stretch that is segmented. You see the little squares, little checkers on there? We'll put another layer of soil on top of that, and then another layer of geofabric, and it kind of holds it together. It keeps the land from slipping out in wet areas. This is a really big feature in areas that are remote. Okay, it's hard to get to. We don't want to go back in there. Geotech layers. Of course, riprap. Everybody knows about riprap, right? You think that slope is steep? That comes down into a really steep ravine, okay? So riprap's not a big deal, except you better tow it in at the bottom. What happens when you put all that weight on the hillside and you don't tow it in at the bottom? Slips out, slumps. Once it slumps a little bit, all that weight overwhelms it, boom. Okay, problems. We don't want that. We don't want that. And then when we get down in really, really steep ravines, sometimes we use them both. Okay, nothing wrong with using riprap and geotech when we can get rock back in those areas. We never want to come back in some of those areas because it's expensive. Are landowners happy when you go back in and tear up their whole roads and create havoc on their properties? No way, man. Okay, they want it one and done, in and out. So there's another landslide. Anybody know where Fish Creek, West Virginia is? Kind of a famous spot down there. Terrible, terrible ravine. Big, hollow, a lot of unstable land. So we had repairs at the top that failed, repair over to the side that failed, and one of my favorites is when it fails and goes off right away. We have material in the stream, we have landowner issues, we have a slope that we've already wasted a couple $100K on, and we still got issues. Okay? So we came in, we did a little bit of everything that I just showed you, and that's what we ended up with. I wish we would have done that from the start. Wish we would have done that from the start. But that's a tough sell. Hey, we got to spend $300,000 up front instead of $100,000, because if we don't, it's going to cost us $1 million in the end. But I can't prove that $1 million. The $100,000 is a real deal that comes out of the budget. Okay? So we have to trust our people. We're getting better at that. We really are. We're getting better. So
who's figuring out these designs? Is it the civil engineers or geologists?
I'll talk to you in just a minute about that. Okay? Yeah, that's a great question. But anyway, so what you see this road? There's a road right up here that's chunking water from a landowner that we don't have access to. That's really the root of this problem. We've done a lot of things to address what we could, but there's just an overflow of water. Landowner is not popular with us, doesn't like the land agent, won't let us on there, and so we're inheriting a lot of water, and that's what really contributed to this. But anyway, put a blanket down up here, put in a ditch, geotech layers all the way down, and riprap. Okay, so this has stayed unto date. Looking good. Another thing that we're doing is this. Not only are we putting silt fence, super silt at the bottom of our repairs, we're putting a layer of P1 at the top. Why would we do that? About water, right? We got to manage the water. Water's our enemy out there on the right-of-way. So we're shedding all the water from that freshly repaired. After that initial stage where you get some growth on there, probably not a big deal. But those initial stretches where we do a fresh repair, if we don't shed that water, it can really eat us alive. Okay? So putting that silt fence on the top of the slope, shedding that water off where it's not coming down to our repair, gives it longer to subside and solidify. Okay, creates a much stabler slope. Another thing we've done is put temporary extensions on some of our water bars. We get down here, that's somebody else's right of way, this is our right of way. How are we going to do that? Because we don't own over there, we can't build it. Hey, let's put a temporary piece of fence there to divert the water for temporary till we get our vegetation up. Cheap fix, okay? Cheap fix. Here's an issue right here, see this? See that little diversion right there? That wiped out the entire slope underneath of us. We fixed that by putting in a 5-foot, 6-foot piece of P1 silt fence. Diverts the water over into the woods, through the timber that's here, problem solved. 1999. Okay, 1999. So, what have we learned? Okay, landslides, what are we learning? How am I doing on time here? We doing all right? Hurry up a little bit. Okay, LiDAR approaches, we're identifying slip areas during construction or before construction. Huge advancement. And we're fixing some of them while we're going through in construction while we have people and equipment there on site. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, instead of remobbing back in. Now, the geotechnical design. When I first got to Williams, and I'm not kidding you this, okay? When I went out to look at a landslide, a guy whipped out a napkin and showed me his slip repair design. And I was like, what did I sign up for? But you know what? That's how a lot of people fixed them back then when we first started out. We slapped it back up on the hill. We did the quickest, fastest, easiest fix. And sometimes they stay, and a lot of times they didn't. Okay? So we now have a geotechnical engineer that takes a look at these things up front or comes and looks at fresh landslides. He takes a look at them. I take a look at them. We talk about what's what. He draws all that up, and that's what we hand out from the early stage. That way our contractor has what we want done. We can bid that out. We can hand that around. We may modify it a little bit once we dig it up, because even as advanced as we've gotten, sometimes when we dig up those landslides, we find hidden water sources. We find other things that are there that we have to modify. Okay, so it's another big improvement. And we utilize a group of very experienced contractors. And I'd like to tell you I'm super smart when it comes to that kind of thing, but I've learned a lot by listening to some of my contractors out there who do this type of work all over the country. Okay, you're crazy if you don't listen to some of your contractors. Okay? Now, what other hot environmental topics do we have out there? Anybody know the longwall mining in the northern panhandle of West Virginia? You thought coal was dead, didn't you? Every time an operator goes down or bankruptcy, the remaining folks' value goes up because of supply and demand. So there is a lot of longwall mining going on in the northern panhandle of West Virginia right now. You know what longwall mining is? I didn't understand all the concepts of it either. They basically take a chunk of ground out underneath there. So let's say a 10-foot chunk of ground underneath of that, and as they pass by, eventually the ground does what? It falls, it subsides. Now why don't you see that? Well, because if you dig a hole in your backyard and then try to put the dirt back in, what happens? There's a mound of dirt. It all doesn't fit. Why? Because it's not compacted like it was when you dug it up. It's the same thing as underground mine. It falls, but it doesn't fall all 10 feet. What we don't know is how much it falls, how much stress is going to be put on our pipes that are in the ground. So guess what we do? We dig them up. And I had a picture, and it didn't make the slide deck, daggone it. But I have a picture of a pipe, the same steel pipe that takes excavators to lift up, that's sticking up out of one of these trenches, 8.5 foot in the air. That's how much force and stress can be created when the longwall panel comes underneath of it and the ground subsides. So we have to dig them up. Does that make environmental guys happy like me? After I spent a year closing the permit out and getting everything put back, and next year, guess what we do? We go dig it up again. Son of a gun. So a lot of this is going on right now. Does it create issues? Holy smokes. Look, there's one. That's a TC line. That's a Dominion line. And these are our two lines. All in the same hillside. Now, who's got the right-of-way here? Who is SOL? The low man is the SOL. Because guess what? Not only do you take every drop of water that's up here, but you take every drop of water that's coming down from everybody else's pipeline. And they all put it in a point source because they drain it an outlet down. This is a very difficult situation because you have a ton of water and it's all coming right here. So companies have had to work together very diligently to try to keep erosion and other issues out of there because water always runs where? Downhill, right by the stream where we don't want it. Now we got a whole hillside of muddy, dirty water. And not only that, but I got Thomas's water, and I got Dominion's water, and I got everybody else's water. There they are. Next time I'll be on the upside of the hill, though. I'm going to send him my water next time, right? So anyway, very difficult situation, okay? Managing that out there, longwall mining. Longwall mining. And my personal favorite, what other issue is going crazy right now? Anybody know anything about bats? How about mussels? Other endangered species. New bat just got put on the list, or going to be put on the list. Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't know how they're going to handle it, right? So they're holding up a lot of the permits. Killing our planning, right? We got this nice, even year of planned out, and all of a sudden we can't get our permits. Why? Because there's a new bat going to be listed. I'm not sure how to handle it. Okay? Guess what that's going to do? If you don't get trees cut down by March 31st, you can't cut trees until November. You get your permit back in July, so what? You can't build because you don't have your trees down. It's a catch-22. What's that going to do? That's going to force everybody to go build from November all through next winter, when erosion and snow and all the things that we don't want to have happen are going to be there. And everybody's going to be in the same boat. Big problem right now, endangered species. Fish and Wildlife Service is dealing with lots of things, and they got a lot more power than they've ever had with the Endangered Species Act, and creating problems, isn't it? Very difficulties. We're all scrambling to try to catch up. And then I got to explain to my construction guys why we're building all winter when it doesn't make any kind of sense. And this is an environmental issue, they say. Explain it to me. I don't make the rules. I just try to keep us out of trouble. Okay? Just try to keep us out of trouble. So I'll go back to what I said before. Got a daughter in Waynesburg University. She's a junior. Just switched her major. She thought she wanted to be a biologist. Got up there and found out about chemistry and physics and calculus. That's a C word in our house. That's not a good one, okay, calculus. Ooh, that's pretty tough, right? I'm like, yeah, it's not your strong point. You've got to find something that's your passion. Switched over finally to communications, public relations. She's knocking it out of the park, killing it, doing great, just expanding everywhere. I'm like, if you really want to make a difference in the oil and gas business, go be a PR major, because you know why? Because we don't have anybody to tell our story. We've got some people out there telling our story right now, but it's too technical. The people who watch that 5 o'clock news, they can't understand it. And we've got a good story. We've got energy. America has to have our energy, okay? Look at all the billions of dollars we spend on environmental and safety and other things that are out there. We've got to tell our story better. We need people who can take the information, the technical nature of what we do, and convert that into the 5 o'clock news people so they can understand. Why? ACP, MVP. Those acronyms make any sense to you? Why did those projects get shut down? Permits. I've said it my whole career, wait, at some point the activists are going to attack our permits, because there's a lot of gray area in our permits. And all it takes now is someone to get a court who will listen to the nature of our permits, how we got them, what we didn't do. Big business getting shut down. Why? Because the people in the 5 o'clock news are putting enough pressure on somebody to say, you know what, we don't like this pipeline in our backyard. They don't understand the benefits versus the negatives. Nobody on TikTok or Instagram, which is going to be the next wave of voters and people and workforce, understands all we do. I can't explain it to them. I can talk to you guys. We can laugh, we can solve problems. But for me to get on TikTok, those people don't understand what I'm saying. We need a new generation of people who's going to take that and explain how important it is for us to build these pipelines and all the things that we're doing. We've got to share that story. We've got a good one, and we've got to get it out there. So there's a lot of really smart people in this room, very talented people in this room. I hope you'll join me in the fight to advance our cause, to explain that, solve our problems, and get our message across. Because why? If we don't, we all lose. You don't win. I don't lose. You don't win. You don't lose. We all lose. We got a great business. We got a great story. But we got to get it out there. We got to tell what we're doing environmentally. We got to tell what we're doing safety. We got to tell we've got to have energy. But it's got to be in a format where those people can understand that. Everyday, common people, the silent majority out there. So I hope you'll join me in that fight. I have every confidence that we'll get there. I guess they have a lot of smart, talented people in here. So that concludes my presentation. Hope it was interesting. Anyway, you got something out of it. Comments and questions. I wanted to make sure to leave a little bit of time here and be respectful of your time and back to work. This is my work today. I got to come here instead of walking around in the mud. Yes, sir.
How's our industry doing with Trout Unlimited and all the blue ribbon trout streams in West Virginia?
You know, that's a great question. I actually do a program.
I'm a member of Trout Unlimited.
Yeah, very good. We have a great program called Trout in the Classrooms that Eric can tell you we headed that up way, way, way back when. I'm proud to be the first participant in that with Trout Unlimited in West Virginia. So that's part of our message we're getting out there, okay? What we're doing to protect and to serve, okay? Across the country, conservation organizations in general, you know, they're interested, right? Because we're everywhere. We're putting in pipeline. We've got to take that a step further and explain. And when we build a pipeline, we're creating wildlife habitat everywhere. We're putting in giant food plots. And if you look out there a year or two later after we're done, everybody's got a deer stand on that right of. Why? Because it's the best place out there to hunt. Why? Because we're providing that food source. We need to convey that message. That's something we don't even think about in here. You know, all the millions, I hate to say billions, that's a big term. We deal with that term in our neighborhood. But millions of dollars we use on silt sock and paying my inspectors and the things that we do to protect when we build a pipeline. Nobody understands that. We've got to do a better job of conveying that, you know, out there. So you asked me how they're doing. They're doing good. You know, mostly they're at very acceptance of our being because we're a pretty good neighbor out there. I think we could do better. I think we've got to incorporate those conservation clubs in particular, especially powerful ones like TU, which has a national presence everywhere. Very powerful organization. We're going to get them on board more to convey and work with cooperative programs that can benefit that. Other questions, comments? Yokum, you talk like a hick, something like that. That's okay. Yeah.
Has there been any discussion about doing some liquefying of the natural gas instead of piping it? Like, you know, instead of going up and over all these hills, liquefying it closer to the source and then trucking it on the highway?
Yeah, I think there's been all kinds of options. I hope there's a lot of smarter people than me out there looking and seeing what's the best way to transport, you know, to market, what kind of process, you know. What's the biggest problem our gas industry faces right now? We got plenty of supply, right? It's takeaway capacity, right? How do we get that out? We got to build bigger pipelines. Why can't we do that? Because the 5 o'clock news people aren't supportive of us, so the politicians aren't, and we're getting killed in court on some of these permits. That public perception is a powerful tool. That silent majority needs to speak. So, other questions? Good ones. Yeah, Jeremy.
So maybe a couple of years ago, several years ago, Williams did a landslide mitigation study with Golder Engineering. They made a robust site-specific program that went really deep in detail about landslides. Are you guys still using that program?
A little bit.
Feasible in the construction?
There, you hit the word. You used the F word there. The feasible. It's great to talk about it. Is it cost effective? And what we found with the Golder was, and a lot of those were really great designs early on. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but they're really good in concept. When it came down to hauling all that rock way back in there and doing those grandiose designs, and it cost more than the pipelines were. So we've taken some of that, we've modified that, we've tweaked some of that. So I won't say that it was a bust by any means and shape. That was the time I was just kind of coming together with William. So some of that was already in place when I got here. So I didn't participate in that study, but a lot of the results, a lot of the designs from that formed the basis of our landslide mitigation stuff that we do now. Very robust, very active. We're pretty active in that landslide group. Question? Tired of hearing me talk? I sure am. I'll be around here a little bit too. And that's the other thing I'll add, one more before I finish here is, and this is a great networking. You know, I see a lot of familiar faces here, but a lot of guys I don't know, a lot of gals I don't know. Come up and say hello, or, you know, pick up the phone and call. One of the things I've used in my 28 years of experience has been networking. Okay? When the phone rings in the middle of the night and I got a problem and I can't solve it, I got a pretty good resource to reach out to and pick up the phone and call some other folks. Expertise, and we're crazy as an industry if we don't. I know we're all competitive, and I know there's some competitive interests. We're crazy if we don't use each other as a network of experience and skill sets and capabilities. Really are. I'll end with that.
Thank you so much, Kevin. We appreciate you being here.